December 15th, 1944, at 0600 hours near the Belgian town of Malmedy, 18-year-old Private Marcus Williams crouched in a frozen foxhole, his breath forming crystalline clouds in the -10-degree air. The young boxer from Detroit had enlisted 6 months earlier, convinced that his lightning-fast hands and iron determination would make him invincible against any opponent. He believed the stories about American industrial might overwhelming the enemy through sheer production numbers, never imagining that his greatest victory would come not through manufactured weapons, but through the very hands that had once danced around punching bags in his neighborhood gym. Before we dive into this story, make sure to subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you are watching from. It really helps support the channel. What Marcus could not have known as he huddled in that frigid Belgian forest was that within the next 4 hours, he would face an impossible choice that would transform him from a promising young athlete into a legend whispered about in military circles for decades to come, proving that sometimes the most powerful weapon in conflict is the indomitable human spirit. The Ardennes forest stretched endlessly in every direction, its snow-laden branches creating a cathedral of white silence, broken only by the distant rumble of artillery. Marcus Williams had been assigned to the 3rd Battalion of the 333rd Infantry Regiment, part of the 84th Infantry Division, that had arrived in Europe just 3 weeks earlier as part of Operation Overlord's continued push toward German territory. Marcus flexed his fingers inside his wool-lined gloves, the same hands that had won him the Detroit Golden Gloves Championship just 8 months before his 18th birthday. Standing 5 feet 11 inches tall and weighing 178 pounds of pure muscle, he possessed the rare combination of speed and power that boxing coaches dreamed about. His trainer, old Jimmy Sullivan, had called him a natural-born fighter with hands like lightning and a heart like a lion. The young soldier had grown up in Detroit's Paradise Valley neighborhood, where his father worked the assembly line at the Willow Run bomber plant, producing B-24 Liberators, at the unprecedented rate of 1 aircraft every 63 minutes. Marcus had spent countless hours after school in Sullivan's gym on Gratiot Avenue, learning the sweet science, while his mother, Ruby Williams, worked double shifts at the Packard Motor Car Company, riveting engine components for P-51 Mustang fighters. Now, crouched in this Belgian forest with his M1 Garand rifle clutched in hands that had once moved like poetry around heavy bags, Marcus felt the weight of his new reality. The Army had assigned him to Charlie Company under Captain Robert Henderson, a grizzled veteran from the North African campaign, who had made it clear from day one that survival depended on following orders without question. Sergeant First Class Tommy O'Brien, a stocky Irishman from Boston with 23 years of military service, had taken Marcus under his wing during basic training at Camp Shelby in Mississippi. O'Brien recognized something special in the young boxer's determination and had worked tirelessly to hone Marcus's natural fighting instincts into the disciplined mindset required for infantry combat. The morning sun barely penetrated the dense canopy above as Marcus checked his equipment for the dozenth time. His rifle, manufactured at the Springfield Armory in Massachusetts, represented the pinnacle of American small arms technology. The semi-automatic weapon could fire 8 rounds of .30-06 ammunition from its N-block clip, giving American soldiers a significant advantage over enemy forces still largely equipped with bolt-action rifles. Marcus carried 120 rounds of ammunition in his cartridge belt, along with 2 fragmentation grenades manufactured at the Joliet Arsenal in Illinois. His steel helmet, produced by McCord Radiator Company, weighed just over 2 pounds, but could stop shrapnel from a distance of 50 yards. The young soldier's field pack contained 3 K rations, a first aid kit, extra socks, and a waterproof matchbox containing 12 sulfur-tipped matches. Private Johnson, a 20-year-old farm boy from Iowa who had become Marcus's closest friend during the Atlantic crossing aboard the USS General Meigs, occupied the foxhole to his left. Johnson carried a Browning automatic rifle, the squad's primary source of sustained firepower, capable of delivering 550 rounds per minute from its 20-round magazine. The weapon, designed by legendary firearms inventor John Moses Browning, had proven devastatingly effective in previous engagements across Europe. To Marcus's right, Corporal Pietro Benedetti from Philadelphia handled the squad's M60 mortar, a lightweight weapon that could deliver high-explosive rounds at targets up to 2,000 yards away. Benedetti, whose family had immigrated from Italy when he was 5 years old, spoke 4 languages fluently and often served as an interpreter when the unit encountered displaced civilians. The tactical situation had developed rapidly over the past 48 hours. Intelligence reports indicated that enemy forces were conducting a major counter-offensive through the Ardennes, attempting to split Allied forces and recapture the vital port of Antwerp. German armored divisions, supported by mechanized infantry, had broken through American defensive lines at multiple points, creating widespread confusion and forcing hasty defensive preparations. Captain Henderson had received orders at 0300 hours to establish blocking positions along the main highway leading to Malmedy, a critical transportation hub that controlled access to fuel depots containing over 2 million gallons of gasoline intended for Allied armored units. The loss of these supplies would severely hamper the American advance into German territory and potentially allow enemy forces to sustain their counteroffensive for weeks. Marcus adjusted his position as the forest gradually lightened, his boxer's reflexes keeping him constantly alert to movement and sound. His training at Sullivan's Gym had taught him to read opponents through subtle changes in breathing patterns, muscle tension, and eye movement. These same skills now served him well in identifying potential threats in the winter landscape. The temperature had dropped steadily throughout the night, reaching -15 degrees Fahrenheit by dawn. Marcus's breath formed immediate ice crystals in the frigid air, and he had to be careful not to touch any metal surfaces with exposed skin to avoid instant frostbite. The extreme cold affected weapon performance as well, requiring soldiers to manually cycle their rifle bolts periodically to prevent mechanisms from freezing. Private Williams had learned these harsh realities during 3 weeks of intensive training in England before the unit's deployment to continental Europe. The training facility at Tidworth Barracks had simulated winter warfare conditions, teaching American soldiers how to maintain equipment effectiveness in sub-freezing temperatures while preserving their own physical capabilities for extended periods. At 0700 hours, Sergeant O'Brien crawled along the defensive line, checking each position and providing final instructions for the anticipated engagement. The veteran non-commissioned officer moved with the fluid grace of someone who had survived dozens of similar situations, his eyes constantly scanning the tree line for signs of enemy movement. "Williams," O'Brien whispered as he reached Marcus's foxhole, "remember what we taught you about breathing in combat. Keep those boxer instincts sharp, but follow the manual when it comes to fire discipline. We expect contact within the next 2 hours based on reconnaissance reports." Marcus nodded, appreciating the sergeant's confidence in his abilities while understanding the gravity of their situation. Intelligence estimates suggested they faced elements of the 1st Panzer Division, an elite armored formation that had spearheaded successful operations in Poland, France, and the early stages of the Eastern Front campaign. These were not inexperienced conscripts, but battle-hardened professionals with years of combat experience. The young boxer's mind wandered briefly to his family back in Detroit, where his parents would be starting another day of war production work. The Willow Run plant now operated 24 hours daily, employing over 40,000 workers who had collectively produced more than 8,000 B-24 bombers since the facility's opening. Marcus's father, Samuel Williams, had been promoted to line supervisor after demonstrating exceptional mechanical aptitude and leadership skills among his diverse workforce. Ruby Williams continued her riveting work at Packard, where she had become one of the plant's most skilled workers, capable of completing complex engine component assemblies in record time. Her precision and attention to detail had earned recognition from management, and she had been featured in a local newspaper article highlighting the contributions of women to the war effort on the home front. Marcus drew strength from knowing that millions of Americans were supporting the fighting forces through their daily contributions to war production. The statistics were staggering. American factories were producing 47,000 tanks per year, 96,000 aircraft annually, and enough small arms ammunition to supply every soldier with over 1,000 rounds monthly. This industrial capacity represented the decisive advantage that would ultimately determine the outcome of the global conflict. At 0730 hours, the first sounds of approaching vehicles echoed through the forest. Marcus recognized the distinctive rumble of tracked vehicles moving across frozen ground, accompanied by the higher-pitched whine of engines under load. The sound suggested a substantial mechanized formation, possibly including armored personnel carriers and supporting tanks. Captain Henderson's voice crackled through the field telephone system connecting defensive positions. "All units, prepare for contact. Maintain fire discipline until targets are positively identified and within effective range. We hold this position at all costs." Marcus chambered around in his Garand rifle and settled into his firing position, using techniques learned during countless hours on the rifle range at Camp Shelby. His boxing training had developed exceptional hand-eye coordination and the ability to remain calm under pressure, skills that translated directly to marksmanship. During qualification testing, he had consistently scored in the expert category, with accuracy rates exceeding 90% at distances up to 400 yards. The approaching vehicle sounds grew louder and more distinct as enemy forces moved closer to the American defensive line. Marcus could now identify individual engines and estimate the size of the formation based on audio cues learned during training exercises. The enemy appeared to be advancing in company strength, possibly 150 to 200 soldiers supported by mechanized equipment. Private Johnson shifted nervously in the adjacent foxhole, adjusting the bipod legs on his Browning automatic rifle for optimal firing angles. The Iowa farm boy had proven himself an exceptional marksman during training, but this would be his first experience under actual combat conditions. His hands trembled slightly, whether from cold or nerves, Marcus could not determine. "Easy, Johnson," Marcus whispered softly. "Just like the range back at Shelby. Breathe, aim, squeeze. You got this." The words seemed to calm his friend, who nodded and settled into a more stable firing position. This moment of leadership came naturally to Marcus, whose boxing career had taught him the importance of confidence and mental preparation when facing intimidating opponents. He had learned from Jimmy Sullivan that fear was normal, but success depended on channeling that energy into focused action. At 0800 hours precisely, the first enemy soldiers became visible through the trees. Advancing in tactical formation, with weapons at the ready, Marcus could see their distinctive winter camouflage uniforms and the careful spacing that indicated professional military training. These were clearly experienced soldiers who understood proper infantry tactics and movement techniques. The enemy formation included approximately 30 soldiers supported by what appeared to be an armored personnel carrier and possibly a self-propelled artillery piece. Marcus noted their disciplined advance and coordinated movement patterns, confirming intelligence reports about facing veteran troops rather than hastily assembled defensive units. Sergeant O'Brien's voice carried along the defensive line in a barely audible whisper. "Steady, boys, let them get close. Make every shot count." Marcus felt his heart rate increase as the distance closed between friendly and enemy positions. This was the moment he had trained for, but nothing could fully prepare someone for the reality of combat. He drew upon his boxing experience, remembering the seconds before entering the ring when everything seemed to slow down and his focus became laser-sharp. The leading enemy soldiers reached a point approximately 200 yards from the American positions when Captain Henderson gave the order to open fire. The forest erupted in the coordinated crash of rifle fire as 12 American soldiers engaged their targets simultaneously. Marcus's first shot took down an enemy soldier who had been advancing toward Johnson's position, the .30-06 round striking with devastating effect at close range. The enemy force reacted with professional speed, immediately seeking cover and returning accurate fire toward the American positions. Marcus could hear bullets striking trees around his foxhole and the distinctive crack of rounds passing overhead at high velocity. The sound was unlike anything he had experienced during training exercises, where blank ammunition and simulated effects could never fully replicate the terrifying reality of live fire combat. Private Johnson's Browning automatic rifle chattered steadily as he engaged multiple targets, the sustained fire forcing enemy soldiers to remain behind cover and disrupting their advance. Corporal Benedetti began dropping mortar rounds among the enemy formation, the high explosive shells creating devastating fragmentation effects in the confined forest environment. Marcus continued firing methodically, using his exceptional eyesight and steady hands to engage targets of opportunity as they presented themselves. His boxing training had developed extraordinary visual acuity and the ability to track multiple moving objects simultaneously, skills that proved invaluable in the chaotic environment of small unit combat. The engagement continued for approximately 15 minutes before the enemy force withdrew deeper into the forest, apparently seeking to regroup and assess the American defensive capabilities. Marcus had expended 32 rounds of ammunition and believed he had successfully engaged at least 4 enemy soldiers, though confirming specific results remained impossible in the thick forest terrain. "Nice shooting, Williams," Sergeant O'Brien called out as he moved along the line checking for casualties and ammunition status. "You kept your head like a pro out there. Keep it up." The compliment meant everything to Marcus, coming from a veteran who had survived combat in 3 different theaters. He reloaded his rifle with a fresh en-bloc clip and settled back into his defensive position, knowing this was likely just the first of several engagements they would face throughout the day. At 0900 hours, enemy artillery began falling among the American positions, indicating that the initial probe had been successful in identifying defensive locations for targeted bombardment. Marcus pressed himself deep into his foxhole as high explosive shells detonated nearby, sending shrapnel fragments whistling through the air above his head. The artillery barrage lasted 12 minutes and caused significant damage to several defensive positions. Private Rodriguez from 2nd Squad suffered shrapnel wounds to his left arm and required immediate medical evacuation to the battalion aid station. Corporal Miller's machine gun position sustained a direct hit that destroyed his weapon and forced the redistribution of remaining personnel to maintain defensive coverage. Captain Henderson coordinated the defensive adjustments while maintaining communication with battalion headquarters regarding the tactical situation. Radio reports indicated that similar attacks were occurring along the entire regimental front, confirming intelligence estimates about a major enemy offensive operation designed to break through American lines. Marcus used the temporary lull in fighting to redistribute ammunition among remaining squad members and assist with treating minor wounds sustained during the artillery attack. His natural leadership abilities and calm demeanor under pressure made him a stabilizing influence on younger soldiers experiencing their first taste of combat. Private Thompson, a 19-year-old recruit from rural Alabama who had joined the unit just 2 weeks earlier, was visibly shaken by the intensity of the engagement. Marcus took time to reassure the young soldier and provide practical advice about managing fear and maintaining focus during extended combat operations. "Thompson, I know this is scary as hell," Marcus said quietly. "Back home, I fought guys who wanted to knock my head clean off, but I learned that fear just means you're paying attention. Use it to stay sharp, but don't let it control you. We got good training, good weapons, and good leaders. Stick to your training and trust the guys next to you." The words seemed to have a positive effect on Thompson, who nodded gratefully and checked his equipment with renewed determination. These moments of human connection proved as important as tactical considerations in maintaining unit cohesion under adverse conditions. At 0945 hours, scout reports indicated a much larger enemy formation approaching from the northeast, including what appeared to be 2 armored vehicles and possibly as many as 150 infantry soldiers. This force represented a serious threat that could potentially overwhelm the American defensive position through sheer numerical superiority. Captain Henderson quickly coordinated with battalion headquarters to request artillery support and possible reinforcement, but both requests were denied due to similar pressures occurring across the entire division front. The Charlie Company positions would have to hold with existing resources until the tactical situation stabilized elsewhere. Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders as he realized their small unit might be the only thing standing between enemy forces and the vital fuel depots at Malmedy. The thought of millions of gallons of gasoline falling into enemy hands, potentially extending their offensive capabilities for weeks, provided powerful motivation to hold the position regardless of personal cost. The approaching enemy force became visible at approximately 1,000 yards distance, moving in coordinated formation with armored vehicles providing overwatch, while infantry advanced by bounds from cover to cover. Marcus could see this was a much more sophisticated attack than the earlier probe, executed by soldiers with extensive combat experience and excellent tactical leadership. Sergeant O'Brien crawled along the defensive line one final time, ensuring each position was prepared for what promised to be a decisive engagement. The veteran, non-commissioned officer's calm professionalism helped maintain unit morale despite the overwhelming odds they faced. "All right, boys, this is the big one," O'Brien announced quietly. "We make our stand here. Every round counts, every second counts. Remember your training, trust your equipment, and take care of each other. We can do this." Marcus checked his ammunition count and confirmed he had 68 rounds remaining, plus his 2 fragmentation grenades and the combat knife attached to his cartridge belt. His hands felt steady, and his breathing remained controlled, the same physiological state he had learned to achieve before important boxing matches back in Detroit. The young soldier thought briefly about his boxing career and the dreams he had harbored of professional success after the conflict ended. Jimmy Sullivan had believed Marcus possessed the talent and determination to compete at the highest levels, possibly even earning a shot at major championships within a few years of dedicated training. Those dreams seemed distant now as Marcus focused on the immediate challenge of survival and mission accomplishment. He had learned in the boxing ring that success required total commitment to the present moment, without allowing concerns about future consequences to interfere with current performance. This same mental discipline now served him well in the far more serious context of combat operations. At 1000 hours, the enemy attack began with a concentrated mortar barrage designed to suppress American defensive fires, while infantry forces advanced to assault positions. Marcus counted at least 12 rounds detonating within the perimeter of friendly positions, indicating the enemy possessed accurate intelligence about American defensive locations. The coordinated attack that followed demonstrated professional military competence that exceeded Marcus's expectations based on previous encounters. Enemy soldiers advanced using proper fire and maneuver techniques, while armored vehicles provided suppressive fires that kept American defenders pinned in their foxholes for extended periods. Marcus waited for opportunities to engage targets without exposing himself to concentrated enemy fire, using techniques learned during advanced infantry training that emphasized patience and fire discipline over rapid response. His boxing background had taught him the importance of timing and the value of waiting for the right moment to commit to decisive action. Private Johnson's Browning automatic rifle position came under intense pressure from enemy soldiers who had advanced to within 75 yards of the American perimeter. Marcus could see his friend was running low on ammunition and might be forced to abandon his position if the situation continued to deteriorate. Without conscious decision, Marcus found himself moving from his foxhole toward Johnson's position, carrying extra ammunition and providing covering fire as he advanced across the 30 yards of open ground between positions. Enemy bullets kicked up snow around his feet and struck trees inches from his head. But his boxer's reflexes and natural agility allowed him to reach his destination unharmed. "Johnson, you okay?" Marcus asked as he dropped into the defensive position beside his friend. "Yeah, but I'm down to my last magazine," Johnson replied, his voice tight with stress. "They keep coming from that direction, and I can't get a clear shot without exposing myself to that armored vehicle." Marcus assessed the tactical situation and realized that Johnson's position controlled a critical avenue of approach that could not be abandoned without compromising the entire defensive line. He made the split-second decision to remain and help defend this key terrain feature regardless of personal risk. The young boxer began engaging targets with methodical precision, using his exceptional eyesight to identify enemy soldiers who were attempting to advance using available cover. His steady hands and calm breathing allowed him to achieve accurate shot placement even under the stress of intensive combat conditions. For the next 20 minutes, Marcus and Johnson worked together to maintain defensive fires against overwhelming enemy pressure. They shared ammunition, coordinated target selection, and provided mutual support during the most intense fighting either soldier had ever experienced. During a brief lull in the engagement, Marcus noticed movement in the trees approximately 100 yards to their front. Through careful observation, he identified what appeared to be an enemy machine gun crew, establishing a position that would provide devastating enfilade fire against the entire American defensive line. The machine gun nest was positioned behind a fallen log that provided excellent protection from direct fire while offering clear fields of fire across the American positions. Once operational, this weapon would make it virtually impossible for friendly forces to maneuver or maintain their current defensive posture. Marcus realized that conventional small arms fire would be ineffective against the protected enemy position, and their remaining mortar ammunition was needed to counter the continuing infantry assault. The situation demanded immediate action before the machine gun could begin engaging American positions with sustained fire. "Johnson, you see that position behind the big log?" Marcus asked, pointing toward the enemy machine gun nest. "Yeah, I see it. That's going to be trouble once they get set up," Johnson replied, "but I don't see how we can reach them from here." Marcus studied the terrain between their position and the enemy machine gun nest, noting the available cover and concealment routes that might allow a close approach. His boxing experience had taught him to analyze opponents for weaknesses and develop tactical plans that maximized his own advantages while exploiting enemy vulnerabilities. The distance was approximately 100 yards through heavily wooded terrain that offered multiple covered approach routes if someone moved carefully and used proper fieldcraft techniques. The primary risk would come from enemy infantry soldiers positioned between the current American line and the machine gun nest. But these positions were currently focused on the main assault rather than rear security. Marcus made a decision that would define the rest of his military service and establish his reputation as one of the most courageous soldiers in the regiment. He would attempt a solo assault on the enemy machine gun position using stealth, speed, and his natural fighting abilities rather than conventional weapons and tactics. "Johnson, I'm going after that position," Marcus announced quietly. "Keep them busy here and be ready to support me if things go sideways." "Are you crazy, Williams? That's a suicide run through at least 50 enemy soldiers. Stay here and let's call for artillery or something." Marcus appreciated his friend's concern, but he knew that artillery support was unavailable, and the machine gun position had to be eliminated before it could begin engaging American defensive positions. His boxer's instincts told him that sometimes the only option was to press the attack regardless of apparent odds against success. "Johnson, I've been in tougher spots than this back home. Sometimes you just got to trust your hands and go with what you know. Cover me as best you can, and if I don't make it back, make sure O'Brien knows what happened." Before Johnson could respond, Marcus had stripped off his heavy equipment pack and excess ammunition, keeping only his rifle, one fragmentation grenade, and his combat knife. He began moving through the forest using stalking techniques learned during advanced infantry training, combined with the natural stealth that had served him well during late-night training sessions in urban Detroit. The approach route took Marcus through dense underbrush that provided excellent concealment, but required careful movement to avoid creating noise that would alert enemy soldiers to his presence. His boxing training had developed exceptional body control and the ability to move with fluid grace even under stress, skills that proved invaluable for tactical movement through hostile territory. Marcus paused frequently to observe enemy positions and listen for sounds that might indicate his movement had been detected. The forest environment worked to his advantage by masking small sounds and providing visual obstacles that prevented easy observation of his approach route. After 15 minutes of careful stalking, Marcus reached a position approximately 20 yards from the enemy machine gun nest. From this concealed location, he could observe 3 enemy soldiers working to establish their weapon in a firing position that would dominate the American defensive line. The machine gun crew consisted of a gunner, an ammunition bearer, and what appeared to be a squad leader providing tactical direction. All 3 soldiers were focused on their immediate task and showed no awareness of Marcus's presence in the nearby underbrush. Marcus studied the enemy position and developed his assault plan based on terrain features and the positioning of hostile personnel. The fallen log that provided protection from American defensive fires also created a confined space that would limit the enemy soldiers' ability to maneuver if attacked from an unexpected direction. The young boxer's plan relied on speed, surprise, and his natural fighting abilities to overcome three armed soldiers before they could react effectively to his assault. He would approach from the blind side of their position and engage the nearest soldier with his combat knife before the others could bring their weapons into play. Marcus checked his equipment one final time and controlled his breathing using techniques learned during pre-fight preparation at Sullivan's gym. He felt the same focused calm that had preceded his most important boxing matches, when everything seemed to slow down and his awareness of the environment became crystal clear. At exactly 1100 hours, Marcus began his final approach toward the enemy machine gun position. He moved with the fluid grace of a natural athlete, covering the 20 yards of open ground in approximately 12 seconds, while maintaining complete silence despite the difficult terrain. The first enemy soldier became aware of Marcus's presence only when the young boxer's knife penetrated his winter clothing and ended his participation in the conflict with silent efficiency. The second soldier turned toward the disturbance just as Marcus's left hand, hardened by thousands of hours on heavy bags, connected with devastating force to his jaw. The third enemy soldier, the squad leader, managed to grab his rifle and attempt to bring it into firing position before Marcus's right hand, moving with the speed and precision that had made him a Golden Gloves champion, rendered him unconscious with a single perfectly placed punch to the temple. The entire engagement lasted less than 30 seconds from Marcus's initial approach to the neutralization of all three enemy soldiers. The young boxer had successfully eliminated a critical threat to American defensive positions using nothing more than his natural fighting abilities and a standard military combat knife. Marcus quickly examined the captured machine gun, a state-of-the-art weapon capable of firing 800 rounds per minute with devastating accuracy at ranges up to 1,000 yards. The ammunition supply included over 400 rounds of high-velocity ammunition that could have decimated American defensive positions once the weapon became operational. More importantly, Marcus discovered tactical maps and communication equipment that indicated this machine gun position was part of a larger enemy operation involving coordinated attacks against multiple American defensive lines. The captured intelligence would prove valuable for understanding enemy intentions and capabilities in the immediate area. However, Marcus's immediate concern was the continuing sound of intensive fighting from the direction of his unit's defensive positions. The assault on the machine gun nest had taken him away from his primary responsibility of supporting Johnson and the rest of Charlie Company during their critical engagement with enemy forces. Marcus made the decision to turn the captured machine gun against its former owners by repositioning the weapon to provide supporting fires for American defensive positions. His mechanical aptitude, developed during childhood exposure to his father's automotive work, allowed him to quickly understand the weapon's operating mechanism and ammunition handling procedures. The elevated position behind the fallen log provided excellent observation of enemy forces that were continuing their assault against American positions approximately 100 yards away. Marcus could see at least 40 enemy soldiers maneuvering through the forest while their armored vehicles provided supporting fires from concealed positions. Marcus opened fire with the captured machine gun at precisely 1115 hours, delivering devastating enfilade fire against enemy soldiers who had no expectation of being engaged from their flank. The psychological effect was immediate and dramatic as the entire enemy formation reacted to this unexpected threat from an impossible direction. The sustained automatic fire forced enemy soldiers to seek cover and disrupted their coordinated assault against American defensive positions. Marcus maintained fire discipline while engaging targets of opportunity, conserving ammunition while maximizing the psychological impact of his unexpected supporting fires. Private Johnson later reported that the enemy assault collapsed almost immediately after the captured machine gun began engaging their flank. Enemy soldiers who had been advancing confidently toward American positions suddenly found themselves caught in devastating crossfire from an unexpected direction. Sergeant O'Brien subsequently confirmed that Marcus's one-man assault had single-handedly disrupted an enemy attack that could have overwhelmed American defensive positions through sheer numerical superiority. The capture and employment of the enemy machine gun had transformed the tactical situation from defensive crisis to offensive opportunity. Marcus continued operating the captured weapon for approximately 20 minutes, engaging enemy targets while coordinating with American defensive positions through hand signals and shouted commands. His boxing ring experience of performing under pressure while managing multiple simultaneous challenges served him well in this complex tactical environment. At 1140 hours, the surviving enemy forces began withdrawing deeper into the forest, apparently recognizing that their assault had failed, and continuing the attack would result in unacceptable casualties. Marcus ceased fire and began securing the captured equipment while maintaining observation for possible counterattack attempts. The immediate tactical situation had stabilized, but Marcus realized his isolated position made him vulnerable to enemy action if they decided to mount a specific effort to recapture their lost machine gun position. He made the decision to abandon the captured weapon and return to friendly lines with the valuable intelligence materials he had discovered. Marcus's return movement to American defensive positions required the same careful stalking techniques he had used during his approach to the enemy machine gun nest. However, the tactical situation had changed significantly, and he now faced the additional challenge of avoiding engagement by friendly forces who might mistake him for an enemy infiltrator. The young boxer used predetermined recognition signals and approached Johnson's position from the agreed-upon direction to avoid potential fratricide incidents. His return was greeted with obvious relief by his friend, who had been concerned about Marcus's chances of survival during his solo assault against overwhelming odds. "Williams, you magnificent crazy son of a gun," Johnson exclaimed as Marcus dropped into the foxhole beside him. "What the hell happened out there? 1 minute you were gone, and the next minute that machine gun was chewing up the Germans like a meat grinder." Marcus briefly explained his assault on the enemy position and the intelligence materials he had captured, emphasizing the need to get this information to Captain Henderson as quickly as possible. The tactical maps contained details about enemy unit strengths and planned operations that could prove valuable for defensive planning. Sergeant O'Brien arrived at their position within minutes of Marcus's return, having observed the dramatic change in the tactical situation and correctly deduced that something extraordinary had occurred in the enemy rear area. The veteran non-commissioned officer listened intently to Marcus's report while examining the captured intelligence materials. "Williams, I've been in this army for 23 years and I've never seen anything like what you just pulled off," O'Brien said with obvious admiration. "Taking out a machine gun nest with your bare hands is the kind of thing they write about in history books. Captain Henderson is going to want to hear this story personally." Marcus appreciated the recognition from someone whose opinion he respected, but his primary concern remained the continuing tactical situation and the welfare of his fellow soldiers. The enemy withdrawal appeared to be temporary rather than permanent, and American forces needed to prepare for possible renewed attacks throughout the day. Captain Henderson arrived at the forward positions at 1200 hours to personally debrief Marcus about his assault on the enemy machine gun nest and examine the captured intelligence materials. The company commander, a veteran of previous campaigns, who had seen exceptional courage under fire, was clearly impressed by the young boxer's initiative and tactical success. "Private Williams, what you accomplished out there goes far beyond normal expectations for individual soldier performance," Henderson said as he studied the captured maps. "This intelligence confirms that we're facing the main effort of their offensive operation, and your action probably saved this entire company from being overrun." Marcus felt pride in his captain's recognition, but he remained focused on practical considerations rather than personal accolades. The captured intelligence indicated that enemy forces possessed significantly more combat power than previously estimated, including additional armored vehicles and artillery support that had not yet been committed to the engagement. More importantly, the tactical maps revealed that American positions were being attacked as part of a coordinated offensive designed to capture the Malmedy fuel depots and use them as a springboard for deeper penetration into Allied rear areas. The strategic implications of success or failure at this location extended far beyond the immediate tactical situation. Captain Henderson made the decision to establish a new defensive line that would take advantage of terrain features identified through the captured intelligence materials. Marcus's local knowledge of the area, gained during his reconnaissance of enemy positions, made him valuable for planning these defensive improvements. The company spent the next 2 hours repositioning personnel and equipment to create a more effective defensive posture based on the intelligence Marcus had captured during his assault on the machine gun nest. These preparations proved prescient when enemy forces launched a renewed attack at 1400 hours with additional equipment and personnel. The second enemy assault included 2 armored vehicles and approximately 200 infantry soldiers, supported by mortars and what appeared to be a self-propelled artillery piece. This force represented a serious escalation from previous attacks and confirmed intelligence estimates about the importance enemy commanders placed on breaking through American defensive positions. Marcus had been assigned to a new position that provided observation of likely enemy approach routes, while allowing him to coordinate with multiple defensive positions. His experience during the morning engagement had established him as someone who could be trusted with increased responsibility, despite his junior rank and limited military experience. The renewed enemy attack began with intensive artillery fire, designed to suppress American defensive positions and create opportunities for armored vehicles to advance within effective range of American positions. Marcus counted over 30 high-explosive rounds detonating within the company perimeter during the initial bombardment phase. However, the improved defensive positions established using captured intelligence allowed American forces to maintain effective resistance despite the intensity of enemy fires. Marcus noted that enemy artillery was being directed against positions the company had occupied during the morning engagement, indicating their intelligence was several hours old. When enemy infantry began advancing behind their artillery support, Marcus was able to provide early warning to defensive positions because of his elevated observation post and knowledge of likely approach routes. This advance notice allowed American soldiers to prepare for engagement before enemy forces reached effective small arms range. The fighting that followed proved even more intensive than the morning engagement, with enemy forces demonstrating increased determination and improved tactical coordination. Marcus found himself engaging targets at ranges down to 50 yards as enemy soldiers pressed their attack despite suffering significant casualties from defensive fires. Private Johnson's position came under sustained attack from enemy soldiers who had identified his Browning automatic rifle as a high-priority target for elimination. Marcus could see his friend was in serious trouble and might be overrun if the tactical situation continued to deteriorate without intervention. Once again, Marcus made the decision to leave his assigned position and provide direct support where it was most needed. He gathered additional ammunition and fragmentation grenades before moving across open ground under enemy fire toward Johnson's defensive position. The movement required approximately 45 seconds of exposure to enemy small arms fire, during which Marcus relied on his natural speed and agility to avoid becoming a casualty. His boxing training had developed exceptional spatial awareness and the ability to anticipate and react to rapidly changing situations. Marcus reached Johnson's position just as enemy soldiers were approaching within grenade range of the American defensive position. He immediately began engaging targets with his rifle, while coordinating with Johnson to establish effective crossfire against advancing enemy forces. "Marcus, am I glad to see you," Johnson said, as he loaded a fresh magazine into his automatic rifle. "They've been concentrating on this position for the last 10 minutes, and I'm running low on everything." Marcus quickly assessed their ammunition situation and realized they had sufficient supplies to maintain defensive fires for approximately 15 more minutes at current expenditure rates. However, enemy forces appeared to be concentrating their efforts on this particular position, possibly because they had identified it as critical to the American defensive scheme. The two young soldiers worked together with the coordination that develops between athletes who have trained extensively as a team. Marcus used his exceptional marksmanship skills to engage specific threats, while Johnson provided sustained automatic fire to suppress enemy movement and advancement. For the next 20 minutes, their position withstood repeated enemy attempts to break through American defensive lines at this critical point. Marcus expended over 60 rounds of ammunition and threw both of his fragmentation grenades during the most intensive phase of the engagement. At 1500 hours, enemy forces began what appeared to be a final coordinated assault involving all available personnel and equipment. Marcus could observe enemy soldiers advancing from multiple directions, while armored vehicles moved forward to provide direct fire support against American positions. The tactical situation appeared desperate as enemy forces threatened to achieve breakthrough at several points along the American defensive line. Marcus realized that conventional defensive tactics might prove insufficient against the overwhelming pressure being applied by professional enemy forces with superior numbers and equipment. In a moment of inspiration that would be remembered for decades afterward, Marcus recalled techniques he had learned during his boxing career for dealing with opponents who possessed apparent physical advantages. Jimmy Sullivan had taught him that success against superior opponents required unconventional tactics that maximized personal strengths while exploiting enemy weaknesses. Marcus made the extraordinary decision to leave his defensive position and launch a solo assault against enemy forces who were concentrating for their final attack. His plan relied on surprise, speed, and psychological shock rather than conventional military tactics or superior firepower. "Johnson, I'm going out there," Marcus announced as he stripped off excess equipment and checked his combat knife. "Marcus, that's crazy. There's got to be 50 of them between here and their main position. You'll never make it." "Maybe not, but if we stay here, they're going to overrun us anyway. Sometimes you got to take the fight to the other guy before he gets set for his big punch." Marcus's boxing analogy made perfect sense to him, even if it defied conventional military wisdom about defensive operations. He had learned in the ring that passive defense against aggressive opponents usually resulted in defeat, while unexpected offensive action could disrupt superior opponents and create opportunities for victory. Before Johnson could mount further objections, Marcus was moving through the forest toward enemy positions, using the same stalking techniques that had served him during his morning assault on the machine gun nest. His natural athleticism and boxer's reflexes allowed him to navigate difficult terrain while maintaining silence and avoiding detection. Marcus's approach route took him through the heaviest concentration of enemy forces as they prepared for their final assault against American defensive positions. He moved within arm's reach of enemy soldiers who were focused on their immediate tactical responsibilities and showed no awareness of his presence. The young boxer's plan was audacious in its simplicity. He would attack enemy forces from an impossible direction, using nothing more than his natural fighting abilities and the element of complete surprise. Success would depend on creating psychological panic among enemy forces rather than achieving specific tactical objectives through conventional means. At exactly 1515 hours, Marcus launched his assault by attacking the nearest enemy soldier with his combat knife, while immediately moving toward the next target before surrounding forces could react to his presence. His boxing training had taught him to commit completely to aggressive action once the decision was made to engage. The psychological effect on enemy forces was immediate and dramatic. Professional soldiers who had been preparing for a coordinated assault against prepared defensive positions suddenly found themselves under attack from an impossible direction by what appeared to be a supernatural adversary. Marcus moved through enemy positions like a force of nature, using his boxer's speed, natural strength, and years of combat training to neutralize threat after threat before organized resistance could develop. His assault created panic and confusion that spread throughout the entire enemy formation. Enemy soldiers who had been advancing confidently toward American positions suddenly found themselves looking over their shoulders and questioning their situational awareness. The psychological impact of Marcus's assault far exceeded its tactical significance, as enemy forces began to perceive threats where none existed. Marcus continued his solo assault for approximately 8 minutes, during which he single-handedly disrupted the enemy formation's coordination and destroyed their psychological preparation for the planned attack. His natural fighting abilities, enhanced by years of disciplined training, proved devastatingly effective in close-quarters combat. The young boxer's assault reached its climax when he encountered an enemy squad leader who was attempting to restore order among his increasingly panicked subordinates. The engagement that followed would become legendary among American forces for its demonstration of individual courage and fighting spirit. Marcus approached the enemy squad leader using techniques developed during thousands of hours of sparring practice, closing the distance while avoiding the soldier's attempt to bring his rifle into firing position. The boxer's hand speed and tactical awareness allowed him to seize the initiative before his opponent could react effectively. The hand-to-hand combat that followed lasted less than 30 seconds, but it demonstrated the devastating effectiveness of Marcus's natural fighting abilities against a trained and determined opponent. The enemy squad leader possessed military combat training and battlefield experience, but these advantages proved insufficient against Marcus's superior speed, strength, and technique. Marcus's victory over the enemy squad leader had immediate psychological effects on surrounding enemy forces, who witnessed their experienced leader being defeated in single combat by what appeared to be an ordinary American soldier. The impact on enemy morale was catastrophic and led to the immediate collapse of their assault preparation. Enemy forces began withdrawing from their advanced positions almost immediately after witnessing Marcus's defeat of their squad leader. The psychological shock of his solo assault had destroyed their confidence and created the perception that American forces possessed capabilities far beyond normal military expectations. Marcus used the confusion created by his assault to return toward American defensive positions, moving carefully to avoid both enemy forces and potential friendly fire incidents. His successful return marked the end of one of the most extraordinary individual combat actions in military history. Private Johnson later reported that enemy forces abandoned their assault preparations almost immediately after Marcus disappeared into their formation. The sounds of individual combat and growing confusion among enemy positions created the impression that American forces were conducting a major counterattack with overwhelming strength. Sergeant O'Brien confirmed that the entire enemy formation withdrew from the immediate area within 20 minutes of Marcus's solo assault, abandoning equipment and wounded personnel in their haste to escape what they apparently perceived as a devastating American counteroffensive. Captain Henderson subsequently documented Marcus's actions in official reports that would eventually reach division headquarters and establish his reputation as one of the most courageous soldiers in the European theater. The company commander noted that a single soldier's initiative had prevented the loss of critical defensive positions and possibly changed the outcome of the entire offensive operation. Marcus's extraordinary courage and fighting effectiveness during the engagement near Malmedy represented the finest traditions of American military service. His willingness to risk everything for his fellow soldiers and the mission demonstrated the qualities that made American forces effective against technically superior opponents. The captured fuel depots at Malmedy remained in American hands throughout the remainder of the enemy offensive, providing critical logistical support for Allied operations that eventually led to the final defeat of enemy forces in Europe. Marcus's actions contributed directly to this strategic success by preventing enemy breakthrough at a critical point in the defensive line. News of Marcus's solo assault spread quickly through military channels and eventually reached senior commanders who recognized the exceptional nature of his individual performance. Recommendations for decoration began almost immediately, with multiple witnesses providing detailed accounts of his courage under fire. Marcus himself remained characteristically modest about his achievements, focusing on the performance of his unit as a whole rather than his individual contributions. He credited his boxing training and the support of experienced soldiers like Sergeant O'Brien for whatever success he had achieved during the engagement. Private Johnson received commendation for his own courage during the defensive action, particularly his decision to remain at his position and provide covering fire while Marcus conducted his solo assaults against enemy positions. The partnership between the two young soldiers had proven devastatingly effective against professional enemy forces. The tactical lessons learned during the engagement were incorporated into training programs for newly arriving units, emphasizing the importance of individual initiative and the value of unconventional tactics when facing superior enemy forces. Marcus's example became a standard for individual soldier performance under adverse conditions. In the days following the engagement, Marcus continued serving with Charlie Company as they participated in the broader Allied offensive that eventually led to the final defeat of enemy forces in Europe. His reputation for courage and effectiveness made him a natural leader despite his junior rank and limited military experience. The young boxer's military service earned him multiple decorations, including the Distinguished Service Cross, the nation's second-highest award for extraordinary heroism in combat. The citation specifically noted his willingness to risk his life repeatedly for the welfare of his fellow soldiers and the success of the mission. Marcus Williams returned to Detroit after the conclusion of hostilities in Europe, where he was welcomed as a hero by his family and community. His parents, Samuel and Ruby Williams, had followed news of their son's military service through letters and official notifications that eventually included accounts of his exceptional courage under fire. Jimmy Sullivan, Marcus's boxing trainer, organized a celebration at the Gratiot Avenue Gym, where the young soldier had learned the skills that served him so well during combat operations. The boxing community recognized that their sport had contributed to developing the physical and mental attributes that made Marcus's extraordinary military service possible. Marcus resumed his boxing career after completing his military obligation, but his experiences in combat had changed his perspective on competition and personal achievement. While he continued to train and compete effectively, his priorities had shifted toward using his platform to inspire young people and support veterans' causes. The young veteran eventually established a boxing program for disadvantaged youth in Detroit, teaching not only athletic skills, but also the discipline, determination, and courage that had characterized his own military service. His program became a model for similar efforts in other cities and contributed to the development of numerous successful athletes and citizens. Marcus Williams's extraordinary courage during the engagement near Malmedy represented the finest qualities of American military service and demonstrated that individual initiative and determination could overcome apparently insurmountable odds. His willingness to risk everything for his fellow soldiers and the mission established a standard for heroism that inspired generations of military personnel. The tactical success achieved through Marcus's solo assaults contributed to the broader Allied victory in Europe by preventing enemy breakthrough at a critical point in the defensive line. His actions helped preserve vital logistical resources that supported continued offensive operations, leading to the final defeat of enemy forces. Marcus's boxing background provided the physical and mental preparation that enabled his exceptional combat performance, demonstrating the value of athletic training for military service. His speed, strength, courage, and competitive spirit proved perfectly suited for the challenges of infantry combat against professional enemy forces. The psychological impact of Marcus's individual actions extended far beyond their immediate tactical significance, creating legends that enhanced American military prestige and contributed to enemy demoralization. His example demonstrated that American soldiers possessed exceptional individual capabilities that could overcome technical or numerical disadvantages. Marcus Williams's military service exemplified the citizen-soldier tradition that characterized American forces during the global conflict. His willingness to serve his country despite promising civilian opportunities demonstrated the patriotic spirit that enabled democratic forces to prevail against totalitarian opponents. The young boxer's extraordinary heroism near Malmedy became part of military folklore, inspiring countless soldiers who heard his story through official channels and unofficial military tradition. His example showed that ordinary American citizens could achieve extraordinary results when motivated by duty, courage, and concern for their fellow soldiers. Marcus's successful transition from combat hero to community leader demonstrated the positive impact that military service could have on individual development and civilian leadership. His post-war contributions to youth development and veterans' causes continued the service that had characterized his military career. The engagement near Malmedy represented a perfect example of how individual courage and initiative could influence major military operations through decisive action at critical moments. Marcus Williams's solo assaults demonstrated that tactical situations could be transformed through unconventional action by determined individuals. Marcus's boxing career provided an ideal foundation for military service by developing the physical conditioning, mental toughness, and competitive spirit required for combat effectiveness. His athletic background contributed directly to his ability to perform under pressure and overcome apparently superior opponents through superior preparation and technique. The captured intelligence materials that Marcus secured during his first solo assault provided valuable information that improved American defensive capabilities and contributed to the tactical success achieved during subsequent enemy attacks. His initiative in seizing these materials demonstrated the importance of individual soldiers thinking beyond immediate tactical requirements. Marcus Williams's extraordinary military service represented the culmination of a lifetime of preparation through athletic competition, family support, and community involvement. His success demonstrated that American society's emphasis on individual achievement and personal responsibility created citizens capable of exceptional performance under the most demanding circumstances. The young boxer's willingness to risk his life repeatedly for his fellow soldiers exemplified the esprit de corps that characterized successful American military units throughout the global conflict. His example showed that unit cohesion and mutual support could overcome significant disadvantages in equipment, numbers, or tactical positioning. Marcus's innovative use of boxing techniques in military combat demonstrated the value of cross-training and the importance of adapting civilian skills to military requirements. His success encouraged other soldiers to consider how their pre-military experience could enhance their combat effectiveness. The psychological warfare aspects of Marcus's solo assaults proved as important as their tactical effects, demonstrating that enemy morale could be undermined through demonstrations of exceptional individual courage and fighting spirit. His actions created legends that enhanced American military prestige while contributing to enemy demoralization. Marcus Williams's military decorations recognized not only his individual courage, but also his contribution to unit effectiveness and mission success. His example established standards for individual soldier performance that influenced training programs and operational expectations throughout the American military establishment. The young veteran's post-war community service continued the leadership and service orientation that had characterized his military career, demonstrating that the qualities developed through military service could contribute positively to civilian society. His youth boxing program channeled his military experience into constructive civilian applications. Marcus's successful boxing career after military service showed that combat experience could enhance, rather than diminish, athletic performance by developing mental toughness, tactical awareness, and competitive determination. His example encouraged other veterans to pursue their pre-war ambitions, despite concerns about the effects of military service. The engagement near Malmedy became a case study in small unit tactics and individual soldier initiative, demonstrating how determined individuals could influence major military operations through decisive action at critical moments. Marcus Williams's example inspired tactical innovation and emphasized the importance of individual training and preparation. Marcus's integration of boxing skills with military training created a unique combination of abilities that proved devastatingly effective in close-quarters combat situations. His success encouraged military leaders to consider how civilian athletic training could enhance soldier effectiveness and contribute to unit capabilities. The young boxer's extraordinary courage under fire demonstrated that American training methods and military culture could develop soldiers capable of exceptional individual performance against professional enemy forces. His example validated American approaches to soldier development and unit organization. Marcus Williams's willingness to take extraordinary risks for the welfare of his fellow soldiers and the success of the mission exemplified the selfless service that characterized American military culture. His example showed that individual citizens could achieve heroic status through dedication to duty and concern for others. The tactical success achieved through Marcus's unconventional combat methods demonstrated the value of innovative thinking and the importance of adapting to rapidly changing battlefield conditions. His example encouraged tactical flexibility and emphasized the importance of individual initiative in military operations. Marcus's successful return to civilian life and continued contribution to community development demonstrated that military service could enhance, rather than diminish, individual potential for civilian achievement. His example contradicted concerns about the effects of combat experience on veterans' ability to contribute productively to society. The Young Veterans Boxing Program for Disadvantaged Youth created lasting positive impact that extended his military service into civilian society through constructive community involvement. His program became a model for using athletic training to develop character, discipline, and citizenship among young people. Marcus Williams's extraordinary military service near Malmedy represented the pinnacle of individual soldier achievement and demonstrated that American citizens possessed the courage, skill, and determination necessary to prevail against any opponent. His example inspired generations of military personnel and established standards for heroism that continue to influence military culture and training. And that concludes our story. If you made it this far, please share your thoughts in the comments. What part of this historical account surprised you most? Don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from World War II and check out the video on screen for another incredible tale from history. Until next time.